Welcome to Sum It Up Sermon Updates Midweek. This is Sum It Up for April 21st, 2021. We're in the sermon series Clinging to Hope in the Storm, where we're looking at the accounts of Jesus and his disciples in a boat in the middle of water. We've looked at two stories. We looked at the one last week, which is actually the second occurrence in the Gospels of Jesus and his disciples in a boat in a storm. Last week, we talked about how Jesus walked on the water. This week, we talk about how Jesus slept in the boat. I don't know about you, but there are times to where it feels like God must surely be asleep and not noticing what's going on in my life. The disciples woke him up and said, "Don't you care if we drown?" Both of these stories are very interesting to me because Jesus, when he is given the opportunity to speak to his followers about how they're feeling, he challenges them on the depth of their faith. In other words, this is a faith issue. It's not an issue of a storm. It's not about a boat out in the middle of the sea. It's about faith. In the Old Testament, in Psalm 121, it says that God never sleeps nor slumbers, but always watches over Israel. And I know God is always watching over us, but I have to admit there are times to where it feels like he might just be taking a nap, or he might not be looking at me. Maybe he's concerned about what's going on in India at the moment. But there are certainly times where I felt like God has certainly been involved in something else and more interested in that than me. My sermon talked about how fear and confusion in the midst of a storm can make us think some funny things. They woke up Jesus because they thought he didn't care, but Jesus was in the boat too. What's amazing to me about this story is not just that once again the disciples demonstrated their lack of faith, but what amazes me about this story is that at the end of the story, his followers wind up terrified because who is this man who can speak to the winds and the waves? I mean, Jesus said, "Quiet, be still," and the storm stopped. They were terrified. An interesting term to use for a bunch of scared people. Sort of sounds like the fear they were going through in the other story, to where they were rowing the boat for about 9 hours against the winds and the waves, and then they saw a ghost. Well, we know that it was Jesus walking on the water, but they saw a ghost, and they were terrified. Fear is an amazingly overwhelming emotional state. Fear can stop us in our tracks. But on the other hand, perhaps it's not such a bad thing to be terrified of a God who controls the winds and the waves. Perhaps our generation, perhaps our world needs a reminder that our God is not a God to be trifled with, that our God is in control of everything. He is the Lord and the master of all. I think that's the lesson that Jesus' disciples were being taught as they were out on the sea, that Jesus is the master. He walked on the water in one story, and he slept through a bad storm and then woke up and said, "Stop." And when Jesus said stop, the storm stopped. What storm is raging in your life? Are you concerned and worried, and you're trying to let God know that, hey, I'm about to drown here? Or in faith, are you holding on to the God who controls the storm? I mean, that is the point of this story, right? The disciples had little faith. They thought they were going to drown because there was a bad storm. But the Master was with them. Jesus was with them. I preached a story several years ago, almost 3 years ago, at Kentucky Christian University, based on these passages of Scripture, I find it interesting that Jesus makes this issue seem like it's just an issue of faith. Actually, I say it's an issue of illusion. I think that we get fooled into thinking that the important things are important and the not important things are not important, and it's all an illusion. The fear of drowning was an illusion. Jesus was with them. He was going to keep them safe. But they thought the winds and the waves and the possibility of drowning was the real problem at hand. I will tell you that that was an illusion. The real problem was faith. The real problem was that they didn't trust Jesus. That's the real problem. We will all die unless the Lord returns and we're caught up with him in the air. But other than that, we're all going to die. The question isn't, are we going to die? The question is, do we trust God? Just like these men in a boat. Do we trust God? Clean hope in the storm is all about trusting God. I pray that in the midst of your storm, whatever you're encountering right now in your life, that you will trust that the God of the storm will quiet the storm if need be, or he will hold your hand and help you ride out the rough seas if that's what he chooses as well. Hey, thanks. Have a wonderful day and God bless.